at the end of the day, you're sharing with me. So yeah, absolutely.
I think that's doing it.
So dun, dun, dun. Well, it's 5 past, so we'll get started, Adam. There'll probably be some more people who creep in a little bit later, or they're going to get the replay anyway. So, so everyone, obviously, welcome again to another week of Hypnosis Online Meetups. Today, we're going to be going all into the world of public relations, and it's really good, really, because I had the pleasure of chatting on Clubhouse with Adam, and he spoke all about PR, and the information that he shared was absolutely bang on. And the reason being is because he actually has owned his own PR company for 20 years or so, which I'm sure he'll share more with you in a minute. So Adam, first of all, what got you into PR? Just share a bit of the information about yourself.
So for me, my career started straight after doing a psychology degree. I worked in a radio station, and for me, what attracted me to radio was it was quite a cool media. You know, I was interested in broadcast, but effectively, I read a book called Persuasion Engineering by Richard Bandler and John Laval, all about influence. And in particular, at that point, I wanted to learn psychology to be a sports psychologist, but figured out that there was no money in sports psychology. So for me, sales became really appealing after reading Persuasion Engineering. So I went to work in a radio station selling advertising, and realized very quickly that advertising, particularly radio advertising, people hate. It's the adverts that people hate. So I thought, well, I'm interested in the psychology of influence one-to-one, and what's the industry of influence using, you know, mass media through perceptions. How do you change people's beliefs, attitudes? Effectively, that's the industry of PR. So I was interested in media and public relations from a psychological perspective. I worked in a PR agency for a couple of years, actually a year and a half. Loved the proposition, but it was run by an absolute maniac. He was a cokehead. He was very toxic. He was a bully. And thought, you know what? I had my own little Jerry Maguire moment and decided I'm going to set up an identical company, but for myself rather than for this guy. 2 years later, that business was out of business, and I'm still running mine 20 years later. So for me, it was a combination of passion and interest in it, but also an element of integrity. You know, I liked what I was doing, but I didn't want to do it for this particular person.
Yeah, I can imagine that obviously easily driving you away, but obviously it also shows that you've built it up on the right foundations as well. So so obviously one of the big things for you is, since you've become a hypnotist, and you've not necessarily been a hypnotist for a very, very long time, but in that time frame, you've had a hell of a lot of exposure, haven't you? And if you want to just share some of that.
Yeah, totally. So it was around about 6-7 years ago that I kind of had this calling, this kind of intuitive feeling of, why am I not thinking about PR all the time? Why am I constantly thinking about hypnosis and NLP and psychology all the time? So for me, that was kind of like a clue that I should be doing something else, something different. Literally the next day, signed up for a 3-year clinical hypnotherapy course with the LCCH. It was the only one that was university accredited at the time. And basically got, I was never academic as such, but passed with like distinctions and everything, just because I had a real interest in hypnosis and everything about it. And what I found strange, because I'd had 20 years in business, is all of the people in my class were nervous somehow to take their hypnosis skills and actually turn it into a practice, actually start finding clients. And I realized it's because they had reasonable amount of confidence in hypnosis, but they didn't have confidence in generating clients or building a business around that proposition. And for me, I was kind of like the other way around. I had this business experience and had just learned the basics of clinical hypnotherapy. So for me, I was chomping at the bit. I wanted to work with as many clients as possible. So got a practice in Harley Street straight away. That was my first location. Charged prices way higher than I should have done based on the lack of competency I had at the time. But just had a huge amount of self-belief, and effectively did something that intuitively I knew about branding, which is the benefit of a niche, specializing in particular areas. So I built 3 hypnosis brands, not because I was kind of predicting which one was going to be more successful, but purely because I wanted the audience, almost like the customer base, to tell me what they needed more, what they wanted more. So I had a brand based around phobias, a brand based around weight loss, and a brand based around addictions. Had three simultaneously, each with their own website, and that specialism combined with about 18 years worth of PR experience at the time just meant that I was getting lots of media coverage, and you know, that's what I'm going to be talking about, how you guys can get a lot of free publicity and why that's beneficial.
And I think that's the thing, really, exactly what you said there, is many people are already quite tuned into the skills of hypnosis, because let's face it, it's not very, very difficult. But grabbing the bull by the horns, and we've had many conversations on meetups and in Clubhouse as well, it's just being able to have that confidence to get out there and get yourself under the radar, isn't it? So finding that way. So what sort of tips and tricks and everything else have you got to show everyone this evening then?
Everything really. So how to come up with a news hook, how to reach out to the media, how to handle if the media contact you, lots and lots of tips. And to give some background, around about, 3 years ago, I used to do talks in central London on this topic. So this is kind of like a recycled presentation that I've kind of dusted off. And I did at the time build an online course around it, which I don't have anymore. So basically I'm going to give you guys all the kind of stuff that I used to charge for. Hopefully it will be of use to someone. So any tips and advice, and at any point in the talk, if you've got a question, feel free. I think on Zoom you've got like a hand raising function. Ask a question throughout. My goal is to create as much value for you guys as I can. So any questions at any point, raise your hand or just kind of send a message on the chat function, and I'll just kind of pause it there, answer that question, then move on. Absolutely.
And you know me already. I will ask a question. I'll ask
a
good question. Has anyone got anything just before they start, or just before we start, if anyone's got anything they wish to ask to put in place? No, everyone looks good. So yeah, Adam, the show's yours.
Perfect. So is that coming through okay there? Is that on screen? Yeah, perfect. So I guess a bit of an intro to me. As Graham quite rightly said, worked in public relations for a long time. So that company up in the top left-hand corner, the Relations Group, is my PR company, has a turnover of around about 1.2 million a year, so a reasonable sized PR agency. Have about just under 30 staff, work with massive brands, everything from like IBM, Microsoft, big pharma companies to startup food and drink brands, like you name it, we work with them. And generally the kind of area that we tend to focus on is broadcast PR. So it's known in the area of public relations as a broadcast PR agency. Started that when I was 23 years old. I'm now 43, so about 20 years worth of PR experience. And around about 6-7 years ago, decided to become a clinical hypnotherapist, specializing in 3 key areas. So you see there, Hypnosis Slimming was my weight loss brand, still have that, addiction experts, and phobia guru. So 3 different niches in different areas, operating from Harley Street. Obviously, since COVID, I don't work in Harley Street at the moment. Everything is over Zoom, which I'm very happy about because it keeps my overheads very low and makes it even easier to work with clients around the world. I've had a radio show for about 4 years on Share Radio, which is a personal finance radio station. I have a radio show there called Modern Mindset. And about just over a year ago, I turned that radio show format into a podcast called Modern Mindset, which is the first of my 2 podcasts. And the second podcast is called The Hypnotist. So some of you may have heard a few of those episodes, but as it stands, I think I've got about 185 different hypnosis sessions on iTunes, Spotify, currently getting about 50,000 downloads a month, where people get to hear real hypnosis with real clients, tackling different issues. So that's a bit of background on me. Obviously, what we're talking about today is PR coverage, so media relations. And here is a snapshot of a few different bits of coverage. And really, if we're looking at this as a Venn diagram, I've got a reasonable amount of experience as a hypnotist, lots of experience as PR. So the end result is that I get quite a bit of coverage in the media featuring me as a hypnotist. So if you look there on the left, this is in Reader's Digest, talking about what I do for my Phobia Guru brand and the Spider Courage workshops that I do. You'll see in the top left in OK magazine talking about a particular phobia, which is the fear of intimacy or fear of love. And I'll talk about how you can use dates like Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and all these kind of things to secure coverage for whatever your niche is. You'll see there in the Metro, there is something around tocophobia, which is the fear of childbirth. So I got quite a bit of coverage around that based around royal pregnancies, because a lot of people are afraid of pregnancy to the point that they might never have children, and lots of coverage around arachnophobia. So what this does is it really helped me to establish credibility. In my experience, clients have never once asked to see my qualifications. They've never once asked to see who I'm accredited with, who I'm registered with. All of these kind of organizations, BSCH and all this kind of stuff, clients don't care. What does give credibility is referrals, testimonials, and media coverage. In my experience, they're the things that really give credibility. To the point that I'd been a clinical hypnotherapist for about 3 years. It was only when I started getting featured in the Times and Sky News and the BBC that my extended family started asking me if I could help with their issues. So I'd been a clinical hypnotherapist for a while. The point where the media are talking about me, suddenly they're interested, and you'll find that for yourself. You can say that you're a hypnotist and they'll dilute it, they'll consider it a hobby or whatever it might be. But the moment that other people are saying good things about you, in the industry, it's known as third-party endorsement or editorial endorsement, has so much credibility that builds trust, it builds a brand, and it generates clients as well. This is a snapshot. This is my first bit of national TV coverage. So given that we're talking about PR coverage, I thought it would make sense to show you some, but to give some context here, this was national TV, so it's the Victoria Derbyshire show. It goes out on BBC News, which is 24-hour news, but also BBC One, obviously a high-profile national TV station. To give it some context, this required lots of stuff behind the scenes to effectively give me about 5 minutes worth of coverage. I had to be accommodating for them to come out and film in Harley Street on 2 different occasions. First to see the client, which was anonymous in the actual session. So they actually wanted to see me do live therapy with a client. So I had to block out 3 hours of Harley Street time on 2 different occasions, the before and the after, give them loads of background stuff. But for me, knowing the PR game, one of the keys that is going to help you guys get coverage is to be accommodating, is to be understanding, and to help solve the media's problems. And the reason why I got the coverage here is that I had to do quite a bit of work to find a case study of someone that was willing to be on camera, albeit anonymously, so you never actually see their face, going through the very issue that the media wanted to talk to me about. So Victoria Derbyshire producers reached out to me asking, under my brand Addiction Experts, had I worked with someone with gaming addictions? And I had, but none of the people I'd worked with wanted to be on camera, and nobody wanted to kind of give up their time to be in the media. So in this particular case, I had to find a brand new client, offer them free therapy with me, incur the costs of all of that Harley Street time. Meanwhile, I'm not seeing other clients, basically to get 5 minutes worth of coverage. I'll play you the coverage and then explain why that was definitely worth it afterwards. Hopefully the sound will come through when I play this. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound when I play this.
Should you be worrying about gaming addiction?
The worse things got with my family, the more I went into that online world of gaming, and it's consumed my life, and to the point where I lost my job and I lost my family, my home, my job, everything.
One of the largest addiction treatment firms in this country has told this programme that although the figures are still small, The number of people they've seen for gaming has tripled in the last 4 years. We'll talk to an addiction therapist. What's his advice for making sure people don't become addicted to screens? Let's speak to the therapist and addiction expert, Adam Cox, who you saw in that film. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Now, for our audience who might not necessarily be worried about people becoming addicted to gaming, but definitely worried about their kids being on screens for too long, what's your advice?
I think for parents, really, it's to set boundaries. Games are designed to be very addictive because the gaming companies want people to spend more time and, in fact, more money through microtransactions on the game. So the first thing parents can do is to set boundaries. Let them have a certain window of time that they can actually play the games, and say that they can only play the games if they do certain key things like finish homework and get good grades in school, things like that.
Right. And what about that moment, maybe it's 7 p.m. in the evening, where you say, right, time's up, you've had your time on the screen, and they say, I'm in the middle of a game, I can't stop now, and it leads to friction and worse?
I think the reason for that is that the game formats have changed, and it used to be that games didn't involve other people, whereas these battle royale kind of formats, you're playing against other people, and if you've invested a lot of time and you're still playing that game, that represents success. So for a parent to say, right, you've got to stop now, undoes everything they've done up to that point. So my advice to parents would be, allow them to choose certain games that enable them just to pause or stop without any consequences, and maybe those other formats of games, maybe play at weekends and other times.
The numbers addicted to gaming seeking treatment privately are small. Do we really need to worry about gaming addiction?
I think the nature of the model of how these gaming companies make money has changed from selling games, people playing those games, to now a lot of the time the games are free and they make money inside the actual gaming experience. And I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. I think over the next few years we can expect more cases like we saw with this 9-year-old of weeing herself rather than actually leaving the game. We're going to see more cases like this, and more cases of people spending thousands upon thousands of pounds in games, and they can't simply stop.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks for coming on the programme. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for your company. BBC Newsroom Live is next. Should you be worrying?
So, I mean, that kind of snippet there is really, it was that interview plus like a 10-minute feature that kind of saw footage of me working with someone and then actually interviewing the client that I'd worked with that was addicted to playing mobile games and then actually got over that. So I'll talk about this later, but having case studies that are willing to share their experience is a really useful tool to be able to solve the media's problems. The more problems for the media that you can solve, then the more likelihood it's going to be that you're going to get that coverage. So why is it important then, PR coverage? Because for a lot of people, they're going to think, well, there's hassle here. I consider every press release that I send out a raffle ticket, a lottery ticket. There's no guarantee you're going to get any coverage. So why go through all of that hassle? Why write original content? Why nurture relationships with the media if there is no guarantee of coverage? And the key to it is that it offers such a high level of positioning and differentiation. Just to give you an idea, at the point where I did this original talk, there were more than 3,000 hypnotherapists just on the general hypnotherapy register. Obviously, there are others like the hypnotherapy directory. So you've got thousands of hypnotherapists in the UK. You've got approaching 100,000 life coaches in the UK, 23,000 personal trainers. And in each of those respective industries, very few are recognizable names or brands within those niches. So if you are just a hypnotherapist, then you're competing with every other hypnotherapist, and your USP might be your location, your region, which when people were seeing, therapists face to face, your location gave you a USP. Now when everything's on Zoom, it doesn't. So why would they work with you just because you're in their town if they can work with someone more high profile in a different location over Zoom anyway? So competition is fierce. Being competent isn't enough, because if the clients or the overall audience don't know that you're competent, then you're not going to be front of mind when they think of you and your particular niche. So PR and publicity is all about building brands. So something like Forbes, for example, is it has a high positioning with financial success. Someone like Joe Wicks, for example, there are thousands. We just saw there over 23,000 personal trainers, but there's only one Joe Wicks, you know. So he was creating a lot of content, getting a lot of publicity before suddenly he gets, you know, deals with Gusto, for example, and these kind of commercial kind of opportunities. Paul McKenna built his brand through a TV show, first and foremost, but he gets a lot of publicity for his books. A lot of people don't know that Paul McKenna is the most successful non-fiction author in the UK. J.K. Rowling, obviously highest performing and best-selling fiction, but Paul McKenna is actually, he sells more non-fiction books than anyone else in the UK. Tony Robbins, of course, built his name from early appearances on the likes of Oprah, mainly doing phobia cures, you know, early on in his career. That's kind of what elevated his brand positioning. It was publicity that really did it. And Jordan Peterson, you know, you'll be surprised to find anyone that hasn't seen a few of his interviews, because he is quite controversial and he is willing to take risky interviews where he knows the interview is going to try and trip them up, but because he has confidence in his ability to handle those situations, that again has helped elevate his brand. So PR and publicity carries risk. In my opinion, that risk is more than worth it because it has a huge payoff if you can get it right. The goal really is to get the benefit of the publicity. So here's a few benefits that I tend to find are really consistent with PR coverage. And they're also the kind of things that you don't get from other forms of marketing. So if you were doing, let's say, pay-per-click or Facebook ads or directory advertising, you're not going to get huge amounts of awareness, for one thing. The brand position is fairly weak because everyone knows that you're paying for those kind of that placement or adverts or whatever it might be. You don't get huge amounts of credibility, again, because it's a paid for opportunity. So when you get media relations coverage, when it's the media talking about you rather than you selling yourself, first of all, if you're on any significant media title, so that could be a national newspaper, that could be national TV, that could be a national radio station, we're talking millions in audience reach. That is a huge audience of people that are now aware of you and they weren't aware of you before. So awareness is one thing, but secondly, it's what you link that awareness to. So this is why I would encourage any hypnotherapist to really hone in on a particular niche. If you are all things to all people, you become nothing to everyone. So work out what you enjoy the most, what you're knowledgeable the most about, and then try and build your brand around that. Personally speaking, I found it useful to build brands around the niches. So phobia guru, hypno slimming, addiction experts, for two key things. One is that in any other area of healthcare, we never see a generalist. You know, if you need back surgery, you don't visit your GP. In the medical profession, you seek out specialists. And I think hypnotherapy would benefit from a lot more people specializing in very specific areas, so they have genuine competency in that. And that was certainly something I discovered when becoming a hypnotherapist. I went on all the directories, looked after website after website and website of all different hypnotherapists, some very successful. And you would see a long list of areas that people cover, everything from nail biting to blushing, from public speaking to snake phobias. The list sometimes was over 100 long. And I think the logic there is that if people cover more conditions, then they're hoping that if someone sees one condition on there, they'll think, great, this person can help. Actually, it's the opposite. If you have 100 things, then people think that you dabble in all of those things and aren't very good at any of those things. So if you have a niche brand and you get media coverage, then you start building your brand around an expert in those key areas. And that gives you huge amounts of credibility. Credibility is important in a lot of industries. I would say in hypnotherapy, it's even more important because it's unregulated, because you get different levels of training. Some people have trained for years. Some people have done a weekend course. Some people have done online only courses. So credibility makes a huge difference in building trust with potential clients. So anything that can bolster that credibility is really valuable. As hypnotherapists, we know that there are misconceptions about not just hypnosis, but about where it can be, treated for, how useful it is, lots of different things. Public relations is excellent for dispelling misconceptions because it's about creating conversations, and it's also about educating in an area where there's ignorance. So in these kind of things, it's difficult to do in an advert, but in a conversation, you can really educate an audience as to what hypnosis is, or an area, or you can dispel a misconception that people have. It also really, really helps with thought leadership, and I would say PR is similar to being featured in podcasts or being on a stage at events. When you see people, let's look at some of the big hypnosis conferences, for example. You get thought leadership when you see people on a stage talking to an audience, because you trust they are an expert on their particular niche. It's exactly the same with media coverage. When people see you featured in the news, they, just accept. It's almost like a hypnotic suggestion. There is just an unconscious suggestion. You deserve to be there, and therefore you've got the competency and the knowledge and everything else. When somebody else says something about you, it has so much more trust than if you say it yourself. So if you said, I'm an excellent hypnotist, everyone's going to say, yeah, but you would say that. But if I say you're an excellent hypnotist, suddenly it carries more credibility just because it's someone else. So, that kind of thing is really beneficial. And if credible news organizations feature you as being an authority, the BBC, Sky News, the Times, the Telegraph, carries even more weight than if just an individual says it, because it is that editorial endorsement, and then you get the benefit of the trust in that brand. Obviously, the BBC under a bit of scrutiny right now, but generally people trust the BBC. Generally, people trust the Times. So if you're linked to those publications and they endorse you, you get a lot of benefit from that. It also gives you the benefit to react to the news agenda. So if someone's specialized in PTSD, for example, and there is, let's say, a terrorist attack, or there is another Grenfell, type of incident, there is a huge opportunity for you to be the go-to expert that the media talk to about that. What trauma is this causing? What would be your strategies for coping? If you've got someone that is hypnobirther, and there is a high-profile pregnancy, great, you should be in the media talking about that, getting all that coverage. And the thing is, for me, with my unique perspective, I see editorial opportunities for hypnosis every day. I just get frustrated that I don't specialize in like 100 different things, because there is media opportunities everywhere for this kind of coverage. And one of the secret but really valuable benefits that I found, and I didn't expect it from all this PR coverage, is SEO plus online collateral. So whenever I'm featured in the media, I will not just get the benefit of that media coverage to the few million people that see it, but I will also take a picture of it, I'll scan it, I'll turn it into a social media post, I'll get that out on social media, that creates engagement. I'll show you some examples later on of me being featured in everything from Vogue to the Daily Mail to the Sun to the Times. And the online publications, for those people that don't know about SEO, so it's search engine optimization, these high profile media outlets have got high domain authority. And if you are not only featured in those websites, but they have a link to your site, that gives you huge amounts of SEO juice, as they call it, which means that you rank higher when people are organically searching, which means that you get more traffic for your website completely free. So when I first started getting lots of publicity, I was thinking, right, when I get featured in national TV, national newspapers, I'm going to get loads of inquiries. And that wasn't the case. Yeah, you get a few, but you don't get huge amounts. Where you get the real value is when these publications like the Telegraph and the Times have a link to your website. And then because of that, you're on page 1 or 2 of Google rather than page 20. And that's what gets you all the clients. So it's the SEO value that you get from being featured in these online publications rather than the coverage itself. Also, what you can do is you can leverage that in other things. So, for me, what I tend to do on my autoresponder emails, or if I'm doing a talk, I'll do exactly what I've done today. I'll show everyone that I've been featured in the media, because that then creates a bit of a halo effect, and they're like, oh, this isn't just a hypnotist, this is a hypnotist that's featured in the media. So again, you'd be able to do that. So it isn't just about getting the coverage, it's about leveraging the coverage that you get to get you that benefit on an ongoing basis, if that makes sense. Any questions just on the benefits just before I go into the next section?
If anyone's got anything, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away to Adam. But obviously, just while anyone's thinking, if you're showing up on multiple platforms because of the same story, because I'm guessing if it's a good story, many outlets will try and get hold of it at the same time. So if you're showing up in multiple magazines, newspapers and stuff, that suggestion is absolutely overwhelming then, because someone may see it. It's like the front page of a newspaper. They keep seeing that same story. They think, by George, he definitely is that person who I need to see. And the more that they keep seeing you, the more that they're definitely saying, yeah, that's the person who I want to assist with. So it makes complete sense. Has anyone got any questions at all?
Yeah.
Jane, there she is.
Yeah, here I am. How do you get there?
Well, how do we get there?
Medical journalist. I've drawn a blank every single time.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That's the next bit that we're going to talk about, exactly how to get the coverage. So this is why it's worthwhile, doing all the kind of things I'm about to explain in terms of the tactics and the tools and that kind of stuff. But and for me, I would definitely say it's worthwhile. And I know probably a lot of people are thinking, right, well, there's stuff you've got to do on social media and then kind of email newsletters and all this kind of stuff. PR is just another thing on your to-do list. It is worth it, and it isn't as complicated as you think it is. It'd be different for you, Jane, being, a former journalist or a current journalist. You're going to have those editorial skills, but for a lot of people, they're thinking, where do I even start? And it really isn't that complicated. In terms of, again, one final benefit, and also part of the tactics, the actual strategy of doing it, in many industries, and it is not just related to hypnosis, in many industries, if you think of the chef profession, for example, there are going to be thousands upon thousands of qualified chefs. Some of them are going to be great, but most of them aren't going to specialize in a particular area. So they're going to cook whatever they ask to be cooked for. So they're a generalist. And occasionally you're going to get chefs that are excellent at cooking one specific type of food, and they're going to be the specialist, and the specialist can charge more than the generalist, because everyone can do what the generalists do, but only a few people can kind of cook what the specialists do to the standard that they can. And then eventually they become an expert in that particular area. And then if they're very lucky, they can become a celebrity chef. Now, the celebrity chefs become the very few in the chefing industry that make all the money. So if you are a Gordon Ramsay, if you are a Jamie Oliver, then, and when I was in Vegas for my 40th, Gordon Ramsay's got 4 restaurants that just license his name. He doesn't work there, but he gets a huge amount of money just by putting his name on the side of a restaurant, because he's got that linked to a celebrity chef rather than just a chef. Now, if you think about this, there is an opportunity for this to happen in therapy. Within the field of hypnotherapy, I would say the vast majority of hypnotherapists are generalists. So, they don't specialize in a particular area. They've done a little bit on anxiety, a little bit on habits, a little bit on this. And then whoever turns up, they're going to have a quick chat with them, and they're going to try their very best to work with them in that area, whatever that area is. I would say most hypnotherapists don't turn away clients. They just figure out how they're going to work with them on their particular area. For a lot of the people that I connect to in groups like this, they've elevated up to a specialist. So they've decided, I don't want to be a hypnotherapist in all different areas. I don't want to do hypnobirthing. I don't want to do, nail biting. I don't want to do, I'm going to focus on these key areas. And they're happy to refer people away if they're not in those key areas. And then they become naturally a specialist in that area. And you could probably think of at least 2 or 3 people that in the hypnotherapy area that if someone came to you for that thing, you would probably feel more confident about referring them to that other person, because you generally think they're going to be more competent in that area than you would be, because that's what they do. So they become a specialist. And then for me, the key distinction between a specialist and an expert is that you are known for that thing. It's not just that you are competent in that area, but you are known by other people as being a competent in that area to the level of expert status. And very, very few people, I would say, in any industry, elevate from expert to celebrity. So in the hypnotherapy, you might say, right, well, a Paul McKenna or a Marissa Peer has kind of elevated into that area where they're kind of known as that particular, type of area. But how many celebrity chefs are there? There's hundreds. How many celebrity hypnotists are there? Very few, So I think as an industry, we all benefit by having more people. I know for a fact that if Paul McKenna does something on TV, I get more inquiries because it's good for the whole profession for hypnosis to be talked about. We just need more experts and celebrities in the industry, and then we all benefit in that kind of rising tide, if that makes sense. And media coverage definitely help people to move from specialist to expert to celebrity. It definitely helps. So this is an acronym that I created to make it easy for people to work out what do you actually do to start getting coverage. So the first thing, and it kind of relates directly to what Jane was talking about before, how do you actually do it, is content. You need content, and the media need content all the time. And I used to think of the media, and I love it when I see conspiracy theorists online talking about what the mainstream media are doing, like they're this highly organized, creature that communicates to all different parts of itself. It's a bunch of people, journalists and editors, that work to tight deadlines that have got to come up with stories to talk about. That's what the media is. And if you give them or can help them create good content, then you get the benefit of being included in that content, which gives you the benefit of all that credibility. So one of the key things is to think about what content are you in a unique position to help with? And it's probably going to be related to the area that you specialize in. So that content might be a success story. Like, I challenge you to read the Daily Mail for a week and not see one weight loss success story. They are there every single week. Now you could argue, well, aren't people bored of seeing like these weight loss success stories? No, they're not. And they know that because they look at all the clicks that those stories get. And it doesn't matter if they're connecting that to a new diet or to a new protocol used for weight loss hypnosis. They want success stories. The before and afters that you probably already have in your previous client base are content. So if you kind of reached out to your previous clients and said, look, media started to take an interest in me, would you be happy to share your story? And they say yes. And you turn that into a few quotes. That is half of what the journalist needs to create a story. So you're already halfway there. Content could also be your opinion on stuff. So let's say there is, I got so much coverage throughout lockdown just because I had, reasonably strong opinions on how it would influence anxiety and specific phobias like agoraphobia and mysophobia, which is fear of germs. And because I had opinions on that, they were happy to speak to me because I was an expert talking about anxiety when the narrative was about how is the pandemic going to, affect our mental health. So you already have content. You just need to package it in a way that the journalists would be happy to talk about. By the way, you can recycle the content that you've already produced. So if you went through your social media feed and you looked at your most liked or most commented social media piece, there is probably a clue there as to what you can turn into a press release or some original content. You don't have to start from scratch. You already know what people find engaging. So content is where it starts, and without content, you have nothing. And content could be a short interview with you. So I've got lots of coverage where they don't even want to interview me. They just want to email me questions and I email back with my answers, and that's the content. So it isn't always like this, like Paxman style interviews. Sometimes it literally is. You give them a soundbite. I got some great coverage in like Grazia or OK Magazine because I had a 3-sentence comment on what I thought about Katie Price having day treatment at the Priory rather than actually staying there, you know, on a longer term basis. Just because I had an opinion on that got me the coverage. So you don't need, you know, War and Peace and, you know, 500-600 words. Sometimes 2 or 3 sentences is enough content. Editorial justification is even more important for broadcast coverage because broadcasters are regulated by Ofcom. So whenever you hear about Ofcom complaints and things like that, that's because Ofcom regulate the broadcast industry, radio and TV. The only way that a brand should get coverage is if it's editorially justified. And yet there are grey areas on this all the time. Like Glastonbury, for example, is a commercial enterprise. It's not a charity. And the BBC were promoting that online £20 a ticket event like there's no tomorrow. You know, how that is not a breach of the Ofcom code, I don't know, but it happens all the time. And the key thing is, so long as it is editorially justified, it's absolutely fine. And I would say hypnosis is uniquely placed to be editorially justified because all you've got to do is to build the story around the problem and then position hypnosis as the solution, and you've got yourself a story. So for me, for example, I do a lot of 1-2 session phobia work. I do phobia workshops. Most people don't believe that you can get rid of a phobia quickly. Okay. So one of my key headlines, top lines or news hooks, as they would call it in the journalism industry, is the phrase unnecessarily. So, you know, let's say that we figure out that a particular percentage of people have a phobia of spiders, for example. And let's say that September, October is spider mating season and there's more spiders around. My headline might be, 10 million Brits are experiencing anxiety unnecessarily due to a lack of awareness of solutions. You've got yourself a story there. People are panicking, people are getting stressed, and they don't need to, which means that the call to action naturally sends itself my way, which is, and phobia guru Adam Cox offers a workshop within a few hours, can completely, remove this, this fear of spiders. So that's how you get the editorial justification. You don't build it around your key message. You build it around the problem that you solve. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Just by adding a word can make it really, really, really good there. Yeah.
Yeah. And the key thing is, I'm a big fan of borrowing strategies, borrowing ideas. So whenever you see a good bit of PR coverage, I'm thinking, how can I recycle that idea? And and it doesn't even have to be PR. I had an idea, and Carl Smith beat me to the punch literally yesterday, because I saw a YouTube video based on a sniper. And this sniper was talking about how realistic sniper scenes were in 10 different movies. And I thought, fucking hell, that's going to be great. If I comment on 10 different hypnosis movies, and then I saw yesterday that Carl had kind of already done something similar. But a good idea is a good idea. And it doesn't even have to be your idea. You just think, how do I map across that environment, that context into a different context? And then you've got yourself a great story. Leverage is the next bit. And leverage is something that, for me, represents two different things. One, how do you leverage you and your skills and who you've worked with and what you do and your story to make you more interesting? And the second thing is, how do you leverage the assets once you have them? So if you are featured in the media, then you want to make sure that you use that on your website. So, have a press section on your website so people can see that you're in the media. If someone goes to my homepage of phobiaguru.com, they're going to be able to see TV coverage and national radio coverage on that homepage straight away. And a lot of people nearly get there. So they'll have the logos of the publications or the outlets that they've been on, but that isn't enough. You have to have the ability for people to actually see the coverage. And the great thing is with a lot of these website, let's say kind of platforms and kind of interfaces, you can have images create hyperlinks or kind of image boxes. So if you've been featured in the Telegraph, yeah, have a logo of the Telegraph on your website. But if someone hovers over that Telegraph logo or clicks the Telegraph logo, you want it to either take them to the page where you're featured on the Telegraph website, or come up with an image on screen where they can see that you're in the Telegraph, because anyone could just download 5 or 6 logos of high profile publications and put them on your website. But because anyone can do that, it doesn't have a lot of credibility. But if you can actually show that you have been featured in these publications, then, I mean, it sounds funny, but a few people, when they're on the consultation call with me, they'll say little things like, "Oh, I didn't know you were famous when I booked the consultation call." It's like, in their head, they think, well, because I'm in the media, I'm famous. I'm definitely not famous, but I'm not going to challenge that belief system. That I want them to keep that belief system, because then that kind of, it gives them a different kind of experience working with me. So key question is, how do you leverage who you are? You know, so for example, if you are, you know, current or ex armed forces, police service, how do you leverage that? You know, you've probably got unique experiences that the average person doesn't have. Therefore, I've never been in the police. I've never been in the armed forces. I can't leverage that, but maybe you could. Or if you're, you know, working for the NHS, or if you've done something, how do you leverage that? You've got to look at your unique background, not as, oh yeah, well, you know, that's who I am. You've got to leverage that to make you uniquely positioned to be interesting to the media. So that's something for you to think about, which is going to be unique to you. And then when you get the coverage, how do you leverage so you get the value every single time that someone goes on your website, visits your social media feed? You know, how do you leverage that and amplify that? Is a good question.
Can I ask you, Adam, do you need to ask a company's permission to use their logo on your website?
I'm a big fan of asking forgiveness rather than permission. So
I'm the other way around, so I might swap that around.
Yeah, definitely swap that around, Jane, because here's the key thing. I'm fairly knowledgeable on intellectual property law, to the extent that the process of, because you're not claiming ownership of the logo of let's say the BBC, so no one's going to get confused that I'm the BBC by seeing a BBC logo. So it's very difficult. The worst that they could do is have expensive lawyers send me a letter with a cease and desist asking me to take that logo down. I've been doing this a long time. They've never asked me to take it down. So, you know, from my point of view, I think you're on very safe grounds, because you're not claiming ownership of that, you know, logo. That publication doesn't create confusion from the perspective of a customer or an audience. And here's the key thing. If you try to ask permission to use it, one, you're not going to get it, because it's going to be so far down the list of no one's going to know who to ask. No one's going to respond to your emails. So just do it. And then if they ask you to take it down is kind of it's the more efficient way of doing it.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
You're just putting on there, aren't you, as featured in. So it's not, you're not directly saying this is my TV program or anything. It's just,
yeah, totally. And also there's a fair use policy when it comes to footage and things like that. So I think you can use up to about 30 seconds to a minute of, like, even movie footage in an original YouTube video, which is covered under fair use policy, which isn't a breach of the intellectual property. So, you know, there are, you know, there's a bit of flexibility in terms of using content that you're not the creator for. And I've got, you know, lots and lots of media coverage featured all over my website and social media, and not once has anyone asked me to take it down. There was one case actually, and it was annoying because it was a tiny TV channel called London Live. So community TV in London. There was a movie that came out called It, the reboot. Obviously Pennywise the clown is this kind of evil clown. So I thought, what a great opportunity to get some PR coverage around coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. They invited me on there. I took up my time, go to central London. It's in the same building as the Evening Standard. Did an interview, got about 10 minutes worth, well, 5 minutes worth of coverage, I think. Tiny audience, but it is on the TV, so it kind of looks quite good. And then they had the cheek to say, right, if you want to use the video, you've got to pay a license fee. So I did, you know, it was only like £150 or something like that. And I've definitely got the value of that over the years, because I just use it, you know, on the landing page for coulrophobia, and as I'm featured in TV and all that kind of stuff. And it's helped me get other TV opportunities before in the terms of leverage. But annoyingly, that was the only one that's ever asked me for a fee. And it's probably the tiniest TV channel I've ever been on. So sometimes they do that.
That's quite interesting, actually, because as I've mentioned before, I've been on London Live and I never got asked that when I was on it. So
You better go get the logo then, Graham.
well, it wasn't for hypnosis, so mine was
Oh,
for hypnosis. Sally, I've seen you unmuted. Have you got a question for Adam? Thank you, Jane, as well.
No, I was just going to say that, as Adam said, he covered himself by, if you hover over the logo, you're featuring the coverage that you were in. So surely that is just a
Justification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to, and I think that's when people said that as well. So
Cool, thank you.
Excellent. So next one is expertise. And this is really, you know, for a lot of media, they're looking for experts all the time. And when you reach the point where you become a go-to expert on your particular niche, they'll keep you on their files, you know. So I've been on BBC Radio many times where I just know that somewhere I'm on a BBC database about being a phobia expert, a weight loss expert, and an addiction expert. And if a relevant story comes up, quite often I'll get an email or a phone call out of the blue saying, can you do an interview in 10 minutes time about X? Because I'm on their database somewhere as being an expert on those areas. And the way the BBC work it is how virtually every other media outlet do it. You're going to have like a maximum of 2 or 3 keywords linked to your name as to what you're an expert on. So the way to game the system, if there is one, is to decide in advance, what are those 2 or 3 words that you want to be perceived to be an expert on? And hypnotherapist is not specialized enough. You have to be a niche within a niche within a niche. And, you know, weirdly, once I got that coverage on Victoria, Derbyshire, as a video gaming addiction expert, I've probably got about 10 more bits of media coverage purely as a result of that coverage, because when people look for video gaming addictions, my name comes up, then they visit my website, they see I'm on the TV and they're like, oh, wow, you must be the expert on that. Now, the reality is I've seen very, very few clients on video gaming addiction. You know, it's not really a big thing, but I'm seen as an expert on that particular area. So that gets me even more coverage on that particular area. So just decide, and for me, that was accidental, but you need to decide what expertise, what niche you want to focus on. And the fewer words that you're an expert on, the higher you're going to show up when people Google you. The easier it is for you to think of what media publications to reach out to, becomes a lot easier. So think about expertise. And if you're not sure on what that niche is or what you're an expert on, think about, of all of your clients, what are your 3 or 4 proudest moments? The ones that give you a real sense of, yeah, that really, you know, made you feel fulfilled and it really had an impact on someone else's life. Turn that into a case study, you know, put that on your website. Consider having an additional website where you just focus on that one niche, populate that with a few bits of content, and then you might find that. And here's the interesting thing. If you were to put UK phobia expert or just phobia expert in Google, I'm pretty sure I come up on page 1 of Google. So that helps. It massively helps if you have an expert linked to a particular name. So if you want to be the hypnobirthing expert or the anxiety expert or the stress expert, a good place to start is to go into Google, put stress expert in there, see who comes up, look at their content and just have more in-depth, more thorough content on that but I would say you win these battles based on specialization, and then it becomes easy or easier to think of your content. So your content becomes easier once you know what it is that you want to be an expert on. And when you're an expert on that, then you can come up with loads of different articles on that particular area, and then it gets easier and easier. And then you can think of the stories. And then what you'll find is that it becomes easier to generate clients because you're more knowledgeable on that area. And it's really helpful to have that kind of specialist area of expertise.
I think Linda had a...
Linda, John, Linda.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Adam, if say you want to have an area of expertise, so like for example, I was a nurse for many years before I became, when I became a counsellor and then hypnotherapist, and so one of my niches is about health related things, and also I've worked for the last 7 years with cancer patients and the family, so cancer as well. But what if that niche isn't really what people are looking for? So like, for example, anxiety is a massive niche, but health-related things, maybe not so much, like health anxiety or phobias about a certain thing, or, like hospitals, cannulas, things like that.
Mm.
So
it's a really good question, Linda. The way I did it in two different ways with me, and I didn't have a blueprint. I just kind of played the odds game. So I said, what kind of areas do I either think there's a big market for, or that I've got some kind of interest or kind of ability to kind of specialize in. So for me, I thought, well, weight loss is the, it's such a big issue, and it causes even more complicated issues. So type 2 diabetes is an absolute pandemic, costing way more lives than COVID ever will. And yet, what's the number one cause of type 2 diabetes? Obesity and inactivity. So I kind of thought, well, this is going to be a really significant area. So I chose that niche. I chose phobias. But one of the benefits of choosing phobias is that I thought, well, there's like 50 different phobias, and there's all these phobia directories and that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, I could be the expert on phobias and then have a landing page for each different phobia. So if you put ornithophobia, for example, fear of birds, again, I'm on page 1 of Google because I've got a dedicated web page just for the fear of birds. But that sits within the overall Phobia Guru brand, which is about all phobias. And here's the thing, if someone's got a fear of birds or a fear of public speaking or a fear of flying, they want to see someone that is an expert on that particular niche. So the website isn't a niche for fear of birds or fear of flying, but that landing page is. So there's me talking a bit about it. I've got a 10-minute video where I'm talking about what causes it. I've got the ability for them to find out even more information if they give me an email address. So when you go to that one web page, you're dealing with an expert on that particular kind of niche. So if for you it's healthcare, I would build a brand, around what was your position when you were in the NHS?
I was a surgical nurse.
Surgical nurse. So I mean, I would see, is there a way that you can integrate that into your brand? Because here's the thing, most hypnotherapists haven't worked for the NHS, and certainly haven't been a surgical nurse. We did the Clubhouse chat the other day in terms of metaphors. Now for me, the connotations of surgery is things like professionalism, precision, due diligence, like all these kind of like really emotive, reassuring words you link to surgery. So maybe there's a metaphor that you can say, you're the hypnotic surgeon or something like that. And then you're leveraging your unique background. And then you've got your positioning story straight away. And then suddenly the media aren't just talking to a hypnotist. They're talking to the hypnotic surgeon. What does that mean? Well, I was a surgeon for the NHS for many years, and, I take the same, diligence and professionalism and preparation that I used to do in surgery into my hypnotherapy clients. And that's why I get such good results. Great. I'd be interested in that story, so it's just about leveraging your unique background.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Right.
And every single one of you will have a similar kind of thing. You'll have USPs. You'll have something unique to you that you can leverage. You know, for me, part of the reason why I had Phobia Guru as a brand is that I had such severe social anxiety when I was a teenager, when I was 19 years old, that I became a recluse for nearly a year. Now, for me, people can't use things against you if you own them and you use them as a foundation for something empowering. So for me, yeah, I was a recluse. Yeah, it wasn't the best time of my life. Yeah, I was very shy, very anxious, and was atrocious around people. But for me, that is now evidence of a transformation. And as hypnotists, we should be evidence of a transformation, because if we can't transform ourselves, we have no right to transform other people. So for me, yeah, I can come across reasonably confident now, but that comes across even more impressive if you kind of hear about the fact that, you know, I couldn't even leave my room without my heart getting over 200 beats per minute, you know, and that's kind of part of my unique story, because not everyone was a recluse. Not everyone was scared of people, you know, so I just think whatever is unique in your life, have it work for you rather than against you.
That was a great question as well there, Linda, and really
Thank
unveiled
you.
some really good points there.
Really helpful, Adam. Thank you.
No worries. And then also with things like branding is the professionalism. So I would say one of the best things that you can do is get a few professional photos taken of yourself. You know, have a proper logo designed. And I see hypnotists all the time, because I do my research. I go on hypnotherapy directories. I look at different websites. Most of them are poorly designed. The logo is something they've done on Microsoft Paint or something like that. And it's kind of like, come on, guys, it's going to cost you like £15 on Fiverr to get a good logo designed. You know, it doesn't cost very much to have a few high resolution, proper photos taken of you in a hypnotherapy practice. And actually a lot of my professional photos I got done because the Metro, when they did a feature on unusual jobs. So I saw that they were looking to kind of do these features. They had a weekly thing. I reached out to them and said, well, I've got an unusual job. I'm a hypnotist. And they said, great, can we interview you? So they interviewed me in Harley Street. They sent a photographer over. And then I just asked the photographer, I said, look, you've just taken a load of pictures for me for the Metro. What are you going to do with the images when after this is done? She said, I'll probably just delete them. I said, how much do I have to pay you to get, you know, the images that you've taken anyway, since you're already here? You've already got your money from the Metro. And she said, oh, give me £100. I'll send you the images over. So I had professional photographs by a photographer taken in Harley Street. I use them everywhere because you don't need loads of them. Just get a few, and then it just adds to your branding, adds to your professionalism, if that makes sense. So have a good logo, have some good pictures, and have a unique brand for each of your brands. So for me, Phobia Guru has its own logo, Hypnoslimming has its own logo, and be consistent, you know, with them. So branding is important, and actually is not as complicated as people think it is. You know, just know what you stand for, know what your keywords are, know who your target audience is, and then, you know, and stick to the same colors is normally a good tool for branding. Relationships, also a vital part of the whole PR process. And if you think of some of the cliches about public relations, the ab-fab type of things, you know, it's all about relationships, darling. You know, essentially, all it really is about knowing people's needs and helping them get what they want. And if that doesn't sound very much like hypnotherapy, I don't know what is. We've already got the skills. You know, any hypnotist that can't build rapport with a client shouldn't be a hypnotist. If you can build a hypnotist with a client, you can build a hypnotist with a journalist. It is about, you know, making that connection and figuring out what they want. And that's how I get most of my coverage, because I've got a better understanding than most that this isn't about me selling me. It is about helping them get what they want, which is an interesting story or an interesting bit of content, or they've got half a page that they need to fill and they have no clue how they're going to fill it. So if I can help them solve their problem, that also gives me the benefit of doing that. And sometimes it's good to do very little things. You know, if you get interviewed by someone, add them on social media, because then they're going to see your stuff and you're going to be front of mind for future stuff. for a few journalists in the early days when I wasn't so busy, I would offer them free hypnosis sessions, because I know that they would tell all their mates in journalism about me, and then that's helped me get some high profile clients and that kind of stuff. You know, you can also give them gifts. So if you're featured in the media, give them a gift of a free session, either with you or that they can re-gift it to someone else, because then their family members are going to work with you. That's how you build relationships with journalists. All these things, super easy to do, but most people aren't thinking about them. And actually, yes, it might have a high perceived value. You might charge £100, £200 for a 1 hour session on Zoom, but what does that cost you? If you've got that, if you've got that hour free anyway, you know, it's, you know, so what? You give up an hour session, but that might lead to a full page spread in somewhere later, because even if they're a low level journalist, you know, your regional newspaper now, what if suddenly they're a national newspaper in 6 months' time and they remember that free session that you gave with them? So you do want to be thinking of the long game when it's about relationships, and you can never build a relationship by figuring out what you can take. It always has to be what you can give. So if you can help them in some way, if you can give them something of value, if you can give them an experience, that builds the relationship. And then you've got the law of reciprocity. They're going to return the favor at some point in time, you know, and maybe it's a year from now when you send out a press release and they're like, ah, that's the lady that gave me that hypnosis session. You know, she was lovely. Oh, of course I'm going to have her as the person, because at some level there is an element of choice. They're choosing you as opposed to someone else. And if you've got the relationship, guess what? You're going to get the coverage. Here's another useful thing. What are your favorite shows? You know, if you love watching the One Show, if you love listening to Jeremy Vine, okay, reach out to them. Reach out to them just with an idea. And you could say, look, I'm a big fan of your show, you know, or I love your article in Psychology's magazine. I absolutely love it. Would you be interested if I put some content together? You know, or what if I gave you a free hypnosis session? You could talk about it on air. You know, by offering stuff rather than pitching, you're going to get a lot more than if you have this kind of thing, right? How do I get in your publication? You know, that's not a rapport builder. How can I help you create a better story? How can I give you up-to-date commentary or interesting opinions on this? That's what's going to do it. So relationships are important, but it's not about schmoozing and dinners and drinks and that kind of stuff. It's just about, you know, genuine connections and helping journalists or editors with their content requirements. Individuality, we've kind of touched on a little bit of this relating to expertise, but you are going to be unique in your own way. So for me, I tend to be, you know, fairly, I mean, for me, I tend to be very matter of fact, you know, so I'm not one of these fluffy, you know, kind of characters and, you know, that kind of stuff. So I don't pretend to be, you know, and I think you want to just embrace who you are as an individual. So if I'm on TV, if I'm on radio, I'm exactly as I would be as if I'm on a Zoom call, you know, because that's what makes me me. So what you don't want to do is to fall into the trap of thinking that in order to get media coverage, you have to sound like Marissa Peer, or you have to sound like Paul McKenna, or you have to kind of sound like someone else. That is a slippery slope where you're going to look ridiculous. So be you, but tailor that to the kind of content that you are and that you can create. And also any elements that are individual to you as a person, to a background, to a story, you know, any personal experiences. You know, I've got a weight loss brand. So recently I lost, you know, about 10 kilos worth of body fat. For me, I was quite happy to share that on social media because it directly aligns to, you know, why what I do anyway, in terms of I'm all about transformations, helping people get from one place to another place. But I'm a big fan of congruency as well. So you want to think of your individual values, because if you value authenticity, or if you feel like you're someone that has to walk the walk before you're willing to work with anyone else, you know, have these stories that back that up, because then that makes you individual. You know, if you've overcome a big challenge, you know, if you specialize in grief and you got over a bereavement, if you worked on yourself before you worked with clients, this is great for your own individual content and story. And you shouldn't shy away from that. You know, whatever you do, don't try and be like every other hypnotist, every other hypnotherapist, because then they don't know when to go to you and when not to go to you. And, you know, if we look at someone like, is anyone familiar with Steve Miller, for example? He does some of the kind of things. Now, I like the game that he plays in the sense that every tabloid and every magazine, TV show needs someone to be comically controversial. You know, for me, he is the Katie Hopkins of kind of hypnotherapy. He's quite happy to have strong opinions, and he's quite happy to back up those opinions. That's not me, so I would never try and play that game, but it is him. He's being authentic with that. So he's absolutely doing the right kind of approach, and he gets a decent amount of PR coverage. And I recognize that because there's so few hypnotherapists that do get PR coverage that I kind of know the other hypnotherapists that do. And he's quite happy to fat shame. Now, I think I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, but he does feel comfortable with that. It's unique. His element is that, well, the end justifies the means, but having something controversial means that journalists know when to have him on, if that makes sense. If they want a bit of clickbait to kind of get people all fired up, he's a good person because he knows he's going to say something controversial. So, but don't try and be that person if you're not. If you're not a Katie Hopkins type of character, don't try and be one, you know, because there is a need for all different personalities and all different types. So for me, like I say, I tend to be the measured, you know, quite knowledgeable kind of voice on a topic. Occasionally I'll have controversial, you know, opinions on stuff, but only if I believe them. So you got to think about who you are as a person and whether or not you are willing to kind of do that. And if you love drama, if you love, you know, kind of heated arguments, great. You know, the media will love you, but just be prepared for a bit of a backlash on certain things, you know. And some people, they don't mind being hated because, you know, it's divide and rule. You know, at least someone has an opinion on you. But you've got to think about who you are as an individual and how you can leverage that in terms of media coverage, if that makes sense.
That's the thing, Adam. Obviously, when you mentioned Steve Miller, looking at your list that you've created here, you can see straight away how he ticks every single box, not necessarily in the positive way. Like in the matter of the fact shaming, that is just 100% his brand. You know, from Fat Families and everything that he did, the way he creates his content. Obviously, his editorial justification just comes from the fact that he is a journalist as well. And yeah, it just shows as to why he's on so many different programs, in so many different categories, and gets such attention because everything that you say there is absolutely radiated by him, isn't it?
And it is, and I mean, I like the guy. I think a lot of people kind of see the kind of facade and think, oh, you know, what a prick and all this kind of stuff. I like the guy. I think he's just very on brand. You know, he knows, you know, that he's opinionated on certain things, and he lives that. You know, for me, that is also being authentic. Just because that wouldn't be me, that doesn't mean that that isn't him. You know, and I think there is absolutely a place for everyone. But you've got to figure out what kind of person you are and how do you leverage who you are uniquely. You know, I would say, you know, a surgical nurse is probably going to have a different approach than, you know, someone that is, I don't know, a former, I'm trying to think of other end of the spectrum there, but let's say a forensic accountant, you know, for example, you know, depending on what your background is, you could leverage that in a different way. You know, if someone was like a trial judge, you know, and now they got into hypnotherapy, you should totally leverage that background because you're gonna have a different skill set and a different approach, but it's all possible to be leveraged in a particular way.
Absolutely.
So timing is another really, really important bit of media coverage. You've got two words there, proactive and reactive, and there is room for both. Proactive is thinking about what journalists will want before they know that they want it. Okay. So the easiest thing to do when you're thinking of proactive is to think of dates in the calendar that are always going to be there. So let's say that you're a hypnotherapist talking about elite or peak sports performance, do you think the media are going to want to talk to you in and around the Olympics? If you give them something interesting to talk about, they will. Now, that's not my area of expertise, so I would be crazy to get in contact with journalists to kind of offer them my opinion on elite sports and all that kind of stuff. My brand is built around phobias. So each and every year when I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and there's all bugs that are designed to scare people, that's a great little platform for me to tap into, but not ideal for someone that specializes in elite level sports people. So you've got to think about, that's why the specialism and the expertise is such an important thing, because then you naturally start thinking of what's these proactive platforms that are relevant. If you are a birthing, I've mentioned that a few times. Well, you've got Mothering Sunday, but you've also got high profile celebrity pregnancies. Great. You want to be reaching out to the media on those particular occasions. If you deal with a lot of stress, there are dates in the calendar like Stress Awareness Week. You've got these dates like Mental Health Week. If you deal with mainly men, then there are things like Men's Health Week or Father's Day. These dates exist on the calendar, and you've got the opportunity to create editorial justification for them. So for example, let's say you were looking at men and you were saying, right, well, men are more likely to commit suicide. Men are less likely to seek help. Men are more likely to be lonely, or whatever it might be. And it's Father's Day coming up. You've got a gift. You've got half of an editorial story there, and the journalist doesn't even know that they need that story yet until you reach out to them. So just fill in the gaps, help them create that story. My first bit of PR coverage, and it was atrocious, by the way, but I just thought, roll the dice, see what happens, was for Christmas. So their headline was, weight loss hypnotherapist offers tips to dieters to get through the festive period. And it was literally 5 tips as to what to do when you're offered a mince pie and you don't want one, and what to do when you're surrounded by chocolate and things like that. And I got the Bromsgrove Gazette, a tiny newspaper, and I got a specialist food publication. Okay. I was over the moon because I got 2 bits of coverage, very low profile. But I tell you what, getting those tiny bits of coverage, putting them on the press section, then meant that when future journalists looked at my website, they could see I was featured in the media. And then that helped me get more high profile coverage. And then when you're in, the Times, the Telegraph, Sky News, BBC, well, then you can get any coverage you want, because the media are going to look at what coverage you've already got to see if they think you're a safe pair of hands. So that's why you need to get that media coverage on your websites and on your social media, not just to show your audience where you've been, but to show other journalists where you've been as well, so that when they look, they're like, oh, well, of course, he'll be good because he's already been in the media lots. And then it gives them that element of trust. Reactive is also, there's a phrase that I love called newsjacking. And this is where you take a breaking story and you turn it into a follow-on story. And I've done this so many times. I'm going to show you an example of how I turned a Katy Perry song into media coverage. Genuinely that's what I did, because it was on the radio and I turned that into PR coverage. So you can take what's around you. So if there is, a high profile, let's say that you work at some level, helping women that are, suffering from domestic violence, for example. If the front page of the Daily Mail, Daily Express has some kind of story about domestic violence, then you want to move on that quick. You want to talk about, whatever you're taking. That might be narcissistic abuse, or it might be building resilience or increasing self-esteem, or whatever it might be. But you want to take that original story and then have your opinion on how to move it forward. So whenever there's breaking stories, a little tip, by the way, and it's worth writing this down if you're interested, whatever the key words are that you specialize in, go into Google, and rather than just the standard Google, go into Google News, put that keyword in there, and then save it as an alert. So here's the thing, whenever there is any articles about phobias in Google News, I get notified of it. And then I get to see, right, I'm either getting inspiration for future ideas that I can do, or breaking stories that I can comment on. And there's been a couple of cases where there's been celebrities that are featured in Google News for having a phobia, and then I reach out and offer them a free phobia session. And that's actually resulted in really good coverage. So there are lots of tips and tactics there, but proactively think about the key dates in the calendar and think, how do you link them to your area of expertise? And then think of when a story breaks, how quickly can you turn that into a different story, if that makes sense. And then your why. And I'm sure, I mean, most people have seen the Simon Sinek TEDx or TED Talk, or read the book, the Power of Why. But effectively, people want to know why you do what you do. And it's really useful, particularly for the front page of your website, not what you do, because clearly you're a hypnotherapist, clearly you specialize in certain areas. Why do you do it? And if you've got a story around why you do it, then that is going to help you in so many different areas. It's the first 5 minutes of whenever you're on a podcast. It's all these kind of things that introduce, if you're on stage, that's going to be your positioning opener to frame the audience in a particular way. Why do you do what you do? Now, for me, I was crippled by social anxiety to the point I couldn't leave a room. I considered suicide at one point, because how do you live a life? You can live a life if you're afraid of spiders. Okay, you can't live a life if you're afraid of people, if it creates that amount of social anxiety. So I had to figure out how to change my beliefs and thoughts so I could manage living in a world where I couldn't be around people. And I did. And then I figured out I could use that same skill set in lots of other areas of my life. That's my positioning story. That's my why I do what I do. But what's yours? And how do you turn that into a nice, catchy way so that when journalists hear about you, they don't just hear you, but they hear why you do what you do. And if they can tap into that, then you're already halfway there. And I think a lot of the speaking industry have kind of taken this principle, a really powerful principle, and they've made it so fucking cheesy, it's unbelievable. So everyone's got this kind of sad story and all this kind of stuff. But if you just get the essence of, you probably do it for a reason. And here's the thing, no one becomes a hypnotherapist for the money. Not one person, okay? You probably do it because you genuinely want to help people. And at some level, the area that you want to help people, you probably have some direct experience either for you or someone you care about. That's your why story. A very genuine reason why you do what you do is going to connect with customers. It's going to connect with journalists. It's going to connect with a wider audience. And that is going to help you get a lot of PR coverage. Any questions on this before we move to the next bit?
I think that's a great point, Adam. Yeah, definitely. If you can capture a video on your website, I suppose, just 30 seconds explaining that, it's definitely going to hold people there a lot longer. Has anyone got any questions? I'm aware of.
I have, yeah.
Oh, go on, Mandy.
Adam, thank you very much. It's brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant tonight. When you say about telling your story, all right, how do you know that it's not going to be like a kind of cliche story? Oh, this has happened to me and that happened to me. Do you know what I mean? Like if you have you've got a story there behind you, talking about suicide and talking about your fear. How do you make your story something? Like if you have a story, but without it sounding, what's the word I'm trying to use?
Yeah, details. I would say there. Details are the key thing. There is some people don't really have a story and they're just trying to make up a story. I think for me, the details of the story make it authentic. I remember attempting to leave a tiny little Luton bedsit with one of those polar heart rate monitors, the little straps that go around your chest, on a little watch, seeing my heart rate go to around 200 beats per minute at the idea of leaving a tiny room, just because my mind couldn't cope with the idea of what was on the other side of that door in terms of other people. That detail makes it not a cliche. It makes it not a generic, oh, I had suicidal thoughts. That makes it real. And the thing is, the details are what people connect with, because it's a real life experience. Because they think, oh, how would they have handled that situation? And someone else's situation, maybe they were a single mum with 3 kids and they didn't know how they're going to pay rent or whatever it is. But there'll be details within that, like the emotion they felt opening a bill or something like that. Like the details are going to be the thing that makes it a really compelling story rather than a cliche, you know, because if it's just like a generic, you know, equivalent of a rags to riches story, oh, I had nothing and then suddenly I'm super successful. That's lazy. That creates a disconnect. Whereas if you've got something unique in there and you will have witnessed something, experienced something, seen something, you know, maybe someone helped you. And then as a result of that, you know, you want to kind of pay it forward or whatever it might be. There'll be something unique in your individual circumstances that become a compelling story. And I would say it's the details, and who better than hypnotherapists to regress back to that moment and then re-experience it. So you remember those details, because that's where your kind of power is.
I think that thing's like kind of doing the reverse engineering of the triangle that you had before, and start at the top, Mandy, of what your overall big message is, then keep working down to the point where you think this happened, okay, but yes, I was also this, and at the time, okay, yes, I was this, but with this, and I was this with this, with this, with this. So you reverse filtering your niche as such, but from whatever your experience is. And even if you think it's daft, write it down, because what you'll end up doing is reading over it. And what exactly what Adam's saying is someone's looking for that connectability that you may have, that they want to actually say as well, this person knows me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I suppose as well, the having your niche, I think, is huge. It's really talking about that and kind of going, and then the way you've said you've advertised it differently, you know, you have a different, and that's kind of all of a sudden just cornered stuff down to me. I went, oh, wow, well then, so then when you say when there's a story with it, it's trying to get that story that it fits right for your niche also. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really. How are we doing for time, Graham? Just so I can...
We've got about half an hour max, sort of thing. Obviously, questions have been going as we go. Sally, was you going to say something?
No, I just wanted to say, well, I do, because I'm speaking, obviously. I just set up some Google alerts on 4 things and just had like about 9 different links on each one. So why did we never even think of that before? So
you've got to really niche down on it though, because otherwise you will.
Yeah, no, I have
random emails.
Yeah.
And also, when you're doing those Google alerts, it's you don't have to turn them all into a PR story. Some of them are just great for social media content. You can share the article with your little take on it, you know, and that's the thing, because if you're known for being an authority on that particular area, great, you know, you can just comment on someone else's story that they've put out there, or you can borrow the ideas. This next page is when, you know, back 3 years ago, I actually had like a short online course around this. That course doesn't exist now, but if there's any key points on here that you're interested in, I can just kind of give some tips and kind of clues on that if that's useful. So how to develop a PR plan, probably worth mentioning a little bit. So a PR plan is, what are the key topics? What are the key times of year that you want to talk about? Having things like good quality pictures that are available for journalists if they need it. Having your top case studies that could be available if you need a quote. You know, having a section on your website that shows previous PR coverage. These are all parts of a PR plan. Occasionally I would do research and poll people, you know, but that's if you've got a bit more, you know, kind of resources to do it. But a PR plan effectively is, what do you want the PR to do for you? What areas do you want to be known for? What times of year are good? You know, what kind of stories could you come up with? Are you doing something really innovative? You know, have you worked with a client? I'm going to show you some examples in a second. Whenever I've had unusual clients with unusual issues, I'm already thinking there is some PR coverage available here. So, you know, that's what you want to be thinking about. And you've got your entire client base to think back on and say, who was my strangest client? You've got a PR story there. You know, that's part of your PR plan. A press release. Press releases can be daunting for people in terms of how to create a press release. But effectively, you need a headline. You need 3 top lines, no more than that, in terms of what makes it a story. And then effectively, the easiest way to think of a press release is problem, implication, solution, call to action. So don't try and sell whatever your service is in the first paragraph. It doesn't work. Make the press release around a problem. And that might, you know, for tocophobia, for example, fear of pregnancy, that could be that a certain number of women across the UK won't ever be pregnant because they have this intense anxiety at the idea of pregnancy. So that might be it. And then the implication of that is that certain women will never be mothers because of this fear. And this fear doesn't even need to be permanent. This could be changed. Solution, deal with an expert that's actually successfully dealt with this issue before. Call to action, you know, visit this website. So problem, implication, solution, call to action is a nice narrative to kind of think of a press release. So it is editorially justifiable. I'm going to use a horrible metaphor, but it will be visual enough that you will never forget. I want you to think of a time, doing a little bit of regression with you, that you had a scab, okay? Now that might be when you fell over as a child, knee, elbow, something like that. And you probably did what all kids did when you had a scab. You picked at it and it made it worse, okay? So problem, implication, you want to pick at the scab. If the problem is that people are stressed or people are anxious, then the second paragraph or third paragraph makes that problem even worse. You want to amplify the story before you solve the story. So pick at the scab. If that metaphor, a horrible metaphor, but if it sticks with you, if it acts as a mnemonic, great. I'm happy with that. So you've got to make it a problem worth solving before people want to solve it. So for me, for example, if my problem is arachnophobia, I've genuinely had clients that have come to my workshops and tell me that they nearly crashed a car because a spider came down the mirror while they were driving at 70 miles an hour. Okay, so the implication isn't, oh, a little bit of anxiety when you go to the bathroom. It's could kill yourself, could kill other people. That's how you amplify, that's how you pick at the scab, okay? So whatever the equivalent in your area of expertise is, make it a horrible story because that makes it more newsworthy, if that makes sense. And then you solve it with your unique way that you do that. But you know, that's essentially what a press release is. It's building a story around a problem that then intuitively and naturally leads to your way that you solve it. And then how to distribute and follow up. So you can do it manually, it takes forever. I personally use press release distribution services. I don't own this company and, you know, I'm not, you know, an affiliate of those, but when I was distributing press releases, I would use a company called Response Source. And Response Source, you pay around about £100 or so to distribute a press release, but then it goes out to all the journalists in particular niches. You have to pay an extra £30 or something to add an image, an extra £75 if you want it out on the Press Association. But anyone can set up an account with Response Source and distribute press releases to journalists all over the country. So a nice little tip for you in terms of doing that. Also, you can then see in the back end who's actually opened it, who's engaged, so then you know who to follow up with. And maybe you don't want to cold call journalists, but you might want to follow up with the 4 or 5 people that have actually kind of seemed like they've engaged with that post at some level. So that's who I would use. I used to have a distribution service called Gorkana as well, and there's various other things, but just as a low-cost way of distributing a press release, Response Source, you know, and I use the metaphor of a lottery ticket or a raffle ticket. You have to think of it that way. Just because you get a press release out doesn't mean you're going to get any coverage. But sometimes I've sent a press release out that I thought was going to do appallingly, and I've been featured in like 5, 6 different publications. And sometimes I had one that I thought is going to kill it, and it's got me nothing. But that's the game, you know. That's the fun of it. So just to manage your expectations, don't get annoyed yourself or anyone else if you don't get any coverage, but just treat it using the NLP proposition of, you know, no failure, any feedback, just kind of what can you learn from that, and then apply that to the next press release. Avoiding the PR pitfalls. I'm going to talk about 3 pitfalls very soon. How to get the media calling you. Make it easy for them to do it. You know, have an out of hours number. Have an email address dedicated for press inquiries, like press at whatever your domain is. Let them know that you want to comment. You know, so in my contact us section of every brand that I have, I'll say, if you're a customer, click here. If you're a media looking for a spokesperson, you know, put here. And it might just be like a little drop down list on the contact form, which is client inquiry or media inquiry. So you just letting the media know you're comfortable with this, you're expecting them to call you, and you're ready for it, if that makes sense. Secrets of broadcast. So in terms of radio and TV, there is a reason why I get so much radio and TV coverage, and that is that I'm very, very accommodating. So, you know, it helps that I'm a broadcaster myself. So, you know, I know that I can contact the BBC with broadcast quality microphones and that kind of stuff. But with TV, you know, when TV call and they say, you know, oh, do you think you might be able to do this? And you say, right, when do you need me? You know, juggle your diary around, be very accommodating, because genuinely, even like I've been on TV quite a bit, they don't come around every week, you know. So when they do, make it super easy, you know, respond to them quickly, answer their questions, let them know that you can be flexible, ask them the question, is there anything I can do to help with this story? I nearly got on, what was it, Good Morning Britain, and they asked for a case study of people binge watching on Netflix. I put like 3 or 4 social media posts out, you know, does anyone struggle with binge watching to the point that it's actually affecting their life? I just couldn't get a case study. So, you know, make the effort, you know, but at the same time, don't fabricate, you know, don't lie with this kind of stuff. Make sure you've got genuine case studies or genuine quotes and that kind of stuff, and then you deserve, you know, the good coverage that you get. How to newsjack. I mean, we've mentioned the Google News alert there, but read the news. You know, I don't physically get newspapers anymore, but the moment I wake up, I say, Alexa, tell me the news. And, you know, if there is a story in the BBC top news stories of the day that relates to any area that I'm talking about on, I'm already thinking while I'm having a shower, how do I turn this into PR coverage? You know, I've got the BBC News apps, I've got certain keywords, I've got Sky News. Scroll through. If you see things that relate to you, start thinking, how do I turn this into coverage? How do I turn this into a story? How do I build a problem around this? How do I pick at the scab? How do I turn it into something newsworthy? And then, you know, the stories will come thick and fast. And it gets easier, because the more you're in the media, the more experience you get, and then the more confident you are, and it just gets easier and easier.
Adam, I know, I know you mentioned response source.
Yeah.
But, Ian's asked in the background, the other ways to actually get publicists' attention? Do you just throw out an email out there, phone call?
Yeah, so it's about journalist attention rather than publicists. Publicists generally are the PR people for celebrities. But if you want journalist attention, the other thing that you can do is hashtag journo requests on Twitter. I'm not a big fan on Twitter, but if you follow that hashtag, if journalists are looking for requests, you'll see that in your feed, which is worthwhile. Also reach out to them. You know, what you tend to find is that journalists on any article normally have their full name, so you can easily find them on LinkedIn, or sometimes they have their Twitter handle, and then you can just direct message them. I'm not a big fan of Twitter, but that's also how you do it. You can cultivate those relationships directly, but response source is really, you know, that's casting the net, whereas individual emails or social media messages, that's harpooning, you know. So you can do both, but for me, time is the scarce resource. So I didn't spend a lot of time cultivating individual relationships with journalists. My attitude was, hey, I've got this content, if you're interested, you'll find me. And then that's kind of a more efficient way of doing it for me in the past.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Cheers.
So we've got a few pitfalls here. Number one, don't overcomplicate your message. Keep it really, really simple. What is the problem? What is the implication? How do you solve it in your way? And how do people get in contact with you? Yes, you can be creative with it, but don't make it a complicated message. If it's too complicated, then you're going to have people turning off. So keep it really, really simple. Don't pitch to random press contacts. So I would say it's fine to use something like Response Source to get it out to random press contacts, but don't follow up and cold call individual press contacts that you have no relationship or no relevancy to. You know, I would say when you're contacting or doing follow-ups, generally you want to use direct message on social media or email as your first point of contact, and only speak to them on the phone if they've attempted to call you first or they've already communicated to you in written communication first. Journalists don't like a cold call, and probably you don't like making cold calls either. So I would say not the best use of your time. Plus it's going to give you negative connotations with the idea of getting media coverage. So I've had a ton of PR coverage, never made a single cold call to a journalist. So just don't do that. And don't send generic pitches. You know, you've got to come up with a story. So if you're thinking, you know, I like the one that I did around the top 5 phobias that make Valentine's Day a nightmare. So if you've got a fear of germs, then kissing is kind of not the best thing. If you've got a fear of intimacy, if you've got a fear of commitment, all these kind of things, that was a story. That wasn't a generic pitch that says, hey, I'm a phobia expert. Do you want to speak to me? It was, it's Valentine's Day. These are the top phobias that can make Valentine's Day a misery. And this is my take on it. And then a specific story is going to get you coverage. So don't be generic is really the pitfall. This final bit here, I just thought, because sometimes like real examples is better than, you know, theory in stuff. So Britain's most well-read newspaper, The Sun. This is an article all about kids spending too much time on digital devices. This was after the Victoria Derbyshire. So this came about from, they hadn't seen that bit, but they reached out to me because of my website, Addiction Experts, and I had a dedicated landing page all about gaming addiction and stuff like that. They reached out to me because they Googled me. So it was just the SEO that enabled them to contact me. But then when they did, I told them that I'd been on Victoria Derbyshire. So that then helped it. They sent me a list of questions. I answered every single question that they asked me quickly. Okay. And then I completely forgot about it. And it was my uncle about a month afterwards. There I am in Harley Street. And then I just get this message on Facebook, and as my uncle saying, oh, nice bit of coverage in The Sun today. I'm like, what? Well, I didn't know. And then, you know, he sent me the picture. I put it on social media. And it was also, more importantly than the printed coverage, which had an audience of, I think, 2 or 3 million, was the fact that they linked back to Addiction Experts from The Sun's website, which had a high domain authority. So that SEO juice was worth loads just by being featured in there. So they got it wrong. I'm not a doctor, but equally, what can I do? They've called me a doctor. So it's not bad for brand positioning, even though it's not accurate. It was worse when I was in the Daily Mail and they called me Dr. Adam Cox. That was annoying because they got my name wrong. But, you know, again, you lose control. There's a great saying when it comes to advertising and PR. Advertising is what you pay for, PR is what you pray for. And what that really means is that what you lose in control, you get back in credibility. Okay, so that's kind of the benefit here. So respond, my tip here, respond quickly to journalist inquiries, and that's going to get you coverage. But then also forget about it. And then sometimes you'll get great coverage and sometimes you won't. I've had people do like a day of my life doing like long documentaries and just the documentary never went out. So sometimes don't worry too much about what happens next. Just kind of do what you do, and then if it happens, it happens, and then get the upside. This is some coverage. Originally, this was in the Telegraph, I believe. I'm pretty sure this is the Telegraph. This was page 3, and the annoying thing is, and this goes back to what I was saying before about the luck of it all. So I tend to spend my Christmases abroad. While I was out, this is a couple of years ago, and this is just before lockdown, by the way, this article here, I came up with this excellent idea on weight loss. And I thought, this is going to get me so much coverage. And I put together this long press release, sent it out right before New Year's Day, because I thought, right, people are going to be talking about weight loss resolutions and all this kind of stuff. Sent it out on the 31st of December, expecting tons of coverage. Honestly, I got nothing for that press release. This, I think, was like something like the 2nd or 3rd of January. And it was a ton of coverage it was the Daily Telegraph, actually, yeah. And what happened is, in October, I had a random call from a freelance journalist who just said, look, we're doing a story on binge watching. Have you had any clients that have worked with you for binge watching? And I had 2 in a relatively short period of time. And in both cases, it was affecting their work, their sleep patterns and things like that. So I just told them about these clients that I was working with, and that I was expecting it was going to get worse, and how Netflix make it really easy to kind of binge watch because they enable you to skip the credits, and you know, the algorithms show you other shows that you're going to watch and all this kind of stuff. So I had a few kind of opinions on it, and then yeah, it went everywhere. And then the reason I knew about the Telegraph coverage was because loads of stations at the BBC radio were calling me saying, did I want to talk about, actually they said, are you the Adam Cox in the Telegraph? I'm like, yeah, could be. So then I did, and I must have got about 10 high quality radio interviews on the back of this coverage here. So the other thing to bear in mind is when you get national print coverage, that leads to other coverage as well. And it was simply because I'd worked with a couple of clients that had a fairly unusual issue, you know, binge watching, and that's where that coverage came from. I had the target of being on the Jeremy Vine show, so Radio 2, most listened to radio station, and I got on the Jeremy Vine show directly as a result of this article. But that was also because I was willing and very flexible. So producer called me, he's like, can you be on the Jeremy Vine show this afternoon? I'm like, yes. What do you need? You know, and that's it. And then just be willing. If you give them too many hoops to jump through, you won't do it. So just be very, very flexible. This is the one I mentioned about Katy Perry. So I was, and I'm gonna be completely honest here. This was a lie, but it was a creative lie. So I kind of feel it's justified. There was a song by Katy Perry. So I'm driving into London. My daughter's in the back. Katy Perry's on the radio, and she had a song called Never Really Over. And in the song, she's talking about getting over a breakup. And one of the lines was, I guess I could try hypnotherapy. I've got to rewire this brain. Okay. And my daughter was listening in the back, and she was like, I don't know, like 8 at the time. And she's like, oh, Daddy, like they're talking about hypnotherapy. Anyway, I couldn't stop thinking about how I'm going to turn this single on the radio into a PR coverage. So basically I put together a press release, and I said, I've had more inquiries for people wanting to get over previous relationships because of the Katy Perry song. It wasn't true, but I kind of felt that it was plausible enough to be true. And anyway, I got featured in the Metro and like numerous other things as well. And it was a great bit of coverage, but more importantly, it got me huge amounts of traction because lots of this article was kind of like in social media, hashtag Katy Perry, and so many people follow that hashtag. So that actually kind of got me lots of kind of traction as well. So sometimes tapping into kind of celebrity names and things, as long as nobody gets hurt. I mean, it wasn't pretending I had a client where it's not. It was kind of like basically saying, I've had a few more inquiries than usual. But anyway, it was a good bit of coverage, but that shows the creative element. Believe it or not, with my fashion sense, I was in Vogue, and that's it, Graham. And basically, nothing to do with fashion, as you could probably tell. It was all about post-lockdown anxiety. They reached out to me. What was my take on what are people going to do after lockdown? You know, how is it going to affect mental health? How's it, what has social distancing done to people feeling comfortable around people? And again, I had a very quick phone conversation with them, responded to their email really, really quickly, and it got me in vogue. And the thing is, you can see these hyperlinks here, the red thing here. So they had a link to my website and also a link specifically to agoraphobia, so kind of fear of being outdoors. SEO value, went through the roof. Certainly helped with my kind of positioning of the website on Google. But also for my YouTube videos, I have got a little intro sequence of like names of titles of media that I've been in. So like BBC, Sky News, Telegraph, Times, all that kind of stuff. And Vogue is on there. So although I've only been in Vogue once, I have that on there because it's quite a prestigious kind of title and carries that kind of weight. And then this final one is another tactic that you should definitely consider, and that is influencers slash celebrities. So we found out from the Google alerts that Love Island contestant Zara McDermott had a fear of singing. So we reached out to her and said, phobia guru Adam Cox will like to offer a free session. She worked with a guy based in Winchester or something like that in Hampshire, something like that, doing tapping. Said it didn't work for her. I did one session with her, and she got over that. And literally about 6 months later, she was then on the X Factor, which had, huge audience and that kind of stuff. And got featured in a few different newspapers and that kind of stuff. And she put it on her Instagram stories, and she's got a few million. So my policy is that my confidentiality, I tell clients at the beginning of a session, they can tell me they've murdered someone. I'm going to keep that confidential. If, however, I offer free sessions to people, normally the one condition is that I can talk about that experience either on my podcast or in the media and that kind of stuff. So for me, I'm quite happy to do free sessions, but I need something back from it. She obviously didn't need the money, but she was happy to do the free session. And because of that, I then used that on social media. Actually, she even referred her gran to me that had, a completely different kind of issue. So my policy is like, do the right things and then the right things happen. So just a few different examples of genuine media coverage and what it took to do that. But that was simply a Google News alert that figured out that this influencer slash minor celebrity had a phobia that I knew I could help with, offer a free session on the basis that I can then communicate that to media and social media. So that is also a useful tactic that you might want to consider. And that's it. That's kind of, I know probably sometimes on these meetups, there's kind of people that have things to sell and that kind of stuff. There's nothing to sell. It's just like, hopefully that's something useful for you guys that might help you get a bit of coverage.
Adam, you say that's that, but I think everyone's heads are just that close to exploding. So much content's just gone in there. It's really, really good. I remember you mentioned on Clubhouse about templates for doing like PR and things. Have you still got templates that you use at all that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few videos that I did at the time that I think I've still got on YouTube. So I'm happy to kind of, if I send them to you, then you can share them around if people want, because there was...
Is that the same one as last time that you shared with me?
Yeah, well, there's that one, which is kind of like pretty much a summary of this kind of conversation. But there was one also that I did on how to write a press release that might be useful. And that was a press release that I did when it was around tocophobia, and it was when Meghan Markle was pregnant the first time, and how actually for a lot of women, there is this kind of fear of pregnancy and that kind of stuff. So you actually see the press release that I write in real time as a video. I think I've still got that video knocking around, so I can certainly share that if that's of use to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll put that into the group. Has anyone got any final questions before we finish? Oh, then
yeah.
Jane. Oh, sorry, Ian got. Was that Ian?
I was just gonna say, people like celebs, the best way of getting in contact with them if they've been involved in something, do you go through their agent or something like that in order to say that I'll happily help you?
Yeah, I mean, generally, it's always worth a direct message. So on Instagram, you can direct message anyone, even if you're not connected. If it's high profile enough, they're going to have someone checking those messages anyway. It's always worth having some kind of a link to a credentials document or site or something like that. So I'd say Instagram in the first instant, or Twitter if you're on Twitter. Like I said, I don't use Twitter. But the other option is either their agent or publicist. So one of the things that you tend to find, like I've worked with a few kind of low-level celebrities that you tend to see in like glossy magazines and things like that. So kind of like supermarket kind of like magazines. And generally their business model is that they need to be featured in these magazines all the time. So if they've got an issue and you can help them, then that does two things for them. One, it's an interesting story for them to be talked about. And secondly, it shows a transformation. So they have to constantly be changing to be interesting to their audience. So if you work in, let's say, alcohol, abuse or something like that, and I don't know, someone's in the newspaper or magazine for like drinking too much, reach out for them, because their publicist is going to want to spin that story. How often have we seen Katie Price, going into rehab and that kind of stuff, and that isn't because the media have uncovered that information. They've told everyone that she's going into rehab because that makes her seem exciting and like she's doing something. It's this constant attempt to keep them relevant. So, with the celebrity game, hard to get high level, like A-list celebrities and that kind of stuff, but not as difficult as you would think for the level of influencer or, the kind of celebrities that you tend to get on like daytime TV and that kind of stuff. That level much easier than you would think to get that kind of caliber of kind of celebrity client.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane.
Cheers, buddy.
Yeah, my question was, it's slightly on a tangent. I've been booked up to do 3 or 4 workshops for a very cool global company. And it feels like I've got a golden ticket in my pocket, and I feel I have. What do I do with it? I don't know what to do to, I want the next cool global company to hire me. How do I do that?
Yeah. So collaborative press releases are quite good. So if you're working with them, you might find that they've already got a PR team. So if I share an example, I started doing phobia workshops for spiders independently. And then we started working with the To Swords group, which own Chessington World of Adventures. And we started doing them at their theme park as part of their VIP experience days. Now, for me, it wasn't about the fact that we had a second venue and that kind of stuff. It was the fact that we had this massive kind of like corporate entity that we were working with, and we were the ones that were doing their kind of phobia treatments. So we got together a press release. I wrote the press release, but then I had a quote from their head of VIP experiences. So then suddenly I've got a press release going out, which is me in quotations plus someone from Chessington World of Adventures on the same press release. And then that's how you leverage that. So I would say they probably already have a PR department if it's a big kind of corporate kind of client. If you can get a quote from their person about the impact that you're making through your workshops and that kind of stuff, you get 2 things in one go there. You get a third-party testimonial of what you're doing, plus you get a quote for a press release, and then that becomes a calling card for any future kind of corporate work in that area. Plus you might get some decent coverage as a result of it as well.
I've had some brilliant feedback, so they've sent all that. So I've got lots of phrases there that I could use. But I mean, do I need to ask their permission?
I would. And also you might find that they're happy to distribute that press release through their channels because they probably have a PR department, whereas you won't have a PR department. So,
You do.
so why not, and just say, look, this could make some great coverage. And it might be internal relations or it might be external relations, but yeah, it's worth asking, yes. I mean, to kind of, I would say when you're working with clients and things like that, always ask permission. When you're working with the media, just take things down if they ask, just so I'm not contradicting what I said before about just doing it.
So I don't put this company's logo up on my website unless I've asked them first.
I would, just because it's a client, because then if they're annoyed by it and that kind of stuff, then it depends what your terms of agreement are. If your standard terms are that you can, share who you've worked with as part of like marketing, then great. If you don't have any kind of fixed terms when people work with you, just a quick email is enough, just so that if any point in the future you can say, but so and so said this would be okay. And I would, don't make it too formal so they feel like they've got to kind of go through the processes. Just a quick, do you think it'd be okay if I just kind of put your logo on my website just saying that I've worked with you, and they'll probably be fine.
Actually, they're very approachable, so I mean that's probably quite easy to do. Yeah, thank you.
Really chuffy there as well, Jane. Well done. Adam, that's really good. In fact, you've inspired Ollie to sign up for a couple of domains. So Ollie, you're getting set up on your websites.
Yeah, I mean, I'm niche in medically stuff, and I just thought this is a great idea. I thought you've done with the 3 different, like one idea per brand. I thought, why don't I do that? So thank you. Oh, Adam, what's that microphone you've got? Because it's really good.
Oh, yeah, it's the most expensive one in the world, mate.
Probably.
Yeah. Sure.
You sound rich and.
I mean, that's just my voice, Ollie. I'll be honest. No, I'm joking. It's I used to have the Rode podcast. I used to have this one. This is a very good microphone here, a USB microphone. This is an XLR microphone. The SM7B is the technical one. If you've ever seen Joe Rogan's podcast, these are the mics that he uses. Very good mics.
No, okay. Thank you.
I've got his stepsister. But that's the crunch. What you can hear on it is your Cloudflare, isn't it? That you've got going through the your little pedal attachment.
There's no pedal.
You're not well. It's not pedal, but it's just a filter, isn't it? The Cloudflare.
Oh, the cloud filter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, I added that to give it some extra gain, extra boost.
Anyway, we're getting I'm getting geeky now. Anyway, Adam, thank you so much for this evening. I've took a hell of a lot away from it, and I'm pretty sure everyone here who's joined us has as well. If anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I guess adamcox.co.uk is my website. You'll see some media coverage on the homepage on that one. That's not really my main kind of niche brand site, but I'm kind of building stuff on there. And I guess Facebook, if you put Adam Cox, you'll see my bold head popping up somewhere, or Instagram is @AdamCoxOfficial.
Awesome, excellent, and yeah, obviously now everyone can now get onto Clubhouse. They can join us on Thursday evenings where we have a good chat and a gossip about all things hypnosis too. Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Please, obviously, do take your time to thank Adam too. Adam, if you can just stay on to the very end, we'll have a little chat. And yeah, everyone, next month we've got Matt Kendall, who's going to be talking about marketing. So carrying on from here,